Hey guys, I rarely make opinion videos. Actually, I think this is my first one, but I find the Smashbox very fascinating, so I'd like to give my take on the legality of it. For those who don't know, the Smashbox is a third-party controller created by Hitbox, which in a nutshell replaces the joystick with digital buttons that allows you to perform certain inputs with much more precision compared to a standard GameCube controller. From what I've seen, it seems to be a split between people who thinks it should be allowed and people who don't, or are not sure. Let's look at it from both perspectives, starting with, well, the positives. Ergonomically, the Smashbox is great because it's essentially an optimized GameCube controller. No need to worry about the joysticks being slightly different because of the manufacturing, or wearing out because of prolonged usage. In my opinion, that's a big positive. To give you an example, the joystick on my GameCube controller is quite loose after I've been using it for so long. Doing perfect pivots have become much harder on it compared to a newer controller I have. With digital inputs instead of a joystick on a Smashbox, any sort of movement will be consistent regardless of how long you've used it. Another good thing about it is players who are used to using an arcade stick for fighting games who want to get into Smash will probably be able to transition more easily with the Smashbox due to the similar layout. In terms of health, it's not unheard of for players to develop wrist problems due to the high action per minute certain characters require in Melee. If not that, the Smashbox can be a great alternative for players who have pre-existing hand injuries or hand problems that, for example, can't grip the controller for long periods of time. As I mentioned before, the Smashbox makes executing techniques much more consistent than a standard controller without the use of macros. I'm not sure about Smash 4, but looking at what was possible in the Melee demonstration, it looks incredible. With this in mind, the metagame can potentially evolve to a higher level with these new options, now made much more practical in terms of human execution. According to Gravy, the person who has had the most time experimenting with the Smashbox, difficult techniques still remain difficult when done on the Smashbox. It's just much more consistent since you're pressing a sequence of buttons, instead of moving your joystick to specific positions, which is harder to control when it comes to performing more technical things. Now let's move on to some issues that could arise, and questions that I think may need to be addressed if the Smashbox is legalized. Well, when you think about it, a tournament is a place where a player's mental skill and physical execution skill is tested. With the Smashbox, the test of physical execution is changed. This begs the question, are we testing how well players can execute tech with strictly a standard controller, or is any controller without illegal mods fine? I'm aware there are other mods like custom notches that ease physical execution without going against the rules. But if these mods are okay, what makes Smashbox not okay? And yeah, I know the two mods are vastly different, but they essentially achieve the same thing, which is consistency. I think this is more of a problem for Melee and less Smash 4, since there's already a myriad of control customizations the game offers. Plus, Smash 4 players have the choice of using Beto for difficult techs. On a side note, speaking of Beto, it's interesting to see how both Beto and Smashbox are similar in some ways, in that they trade off the ease of doing basic stuff for the ease of performing more advanced movement. With Beto, for example, doing fastfall aerials and simply jumping might be a challenge because of the awkward button reconfiguration. In Smashbox's case, you're trading off your joystick to move around with a set of buttons, which may be less intuitive. So I don't see Smashbox as a pure, complete advantage that allows a player to reach some kind of god mode or something. It's more of a trade-off, in my opinion. Moving to my next point, hypothetically speaking, assuming Smashbox is allowed, after a period of time has passed, let's say a year, and a number of players have mastered the controls, it proves to be far superior to the GameCube controller. Does it mean all players who use the GameCube controller must transition to the Smashbox if they want to compete on even grounds? Of course, skill matters more at the end of the day, but what if we're talking about two players with equal skill, and it came down to the controls? If so, and a lot of players do decide to transition to the Smashbox, will there be enough supply for everyone? This could also potentially raise the price wall for any new smashers that want to get competitive. Since if the Smashbox proves to be the superior choice, it's probably also better to start off with it for the muscle memory down the road. This was only a hypothetical situation, an extreme one at that. If it does happen and the Smashbox proves to be superior, as long as there's enough Smashbox supply for everyone who wants one, then I don't think it will be a problem. So in a completely opposite scenario, after the legalization of the Smashbox, it could prove to be too hard to use and many players end up sticking with the GameCube controller. Tournament results aren't dominated by Smashbox users, and the advantages that the Smashbox gives may not be great enough for the majority to transition. In this case, there won't be a problem at all. Okay, so whether the Smashbox is legalized or not doesn't directly affect this next point I'm bringing up, but I feel it's still important to mention. Because of the Smashbox debate recently, there has also been a lot more discussion on what other controller mods are legal. I feel there needs to be a separate and very specific section in the rules for what mods are allowed and what aren't. So long as the mods don't go against the rules, it should be fine. That seems to solve the problem, but this also means the tournament organizers must find a way to regulate controller mods. If controller modification becomes popular, is it realistic to check all the controllers? What if it's a huge tournament? Will there be enough manpower and time to carry out this task? Or should we just trust that everyone has legal mods? Again, whether the Smashbox becomes legal or not, the risk of there being illegal modders will still be there. Which is why I'm saying there needs to be very specific rules in regards to what mods are legal and what aren't, so that people who do decide to mod their controllers will know in advance. In the end, I feel Smashbox is an amazing method of control for Smash, perhaps most useful for Melee from what has been shown. And who knows what it can do for Smash 4, maybe it can do everything Beto can, and more. I see it as an optimized GameCube controller which allows for a level of consistency and gameplay that's extremely difficult on a regular controller, which could push the metagame to new heights. I'm all for it being legalized, but there will be some issues like those that I've mentioned which I think should be addressed as well. There are a number of other people who have uploaded videos of their own point of view on the subject that bring up good points. The creator himself, Dustin Hitbox, Gravy Hitbox, Crimson Blur, Esam, and others. That I'll link in the description if you want to hear their point of view. So tell me what you guys think. Do you think the Smashbox should be legal or not? With that said, I'm amidst working on my next tutorial, so I'll see you again soon.